came out publicly who were actually present and said Trump never said this. Take it for what you will, right? Now, after the story came out, Myra Gulian, the sister of the murdered soldier, she posted this on X. She said, "Wow, I don't appreciate how you are exploiting my sister's death for politics. Hurtful and disrespectful to the important changes she made for service members. President Donald Trump did nothing but show respect to my family and Vanessa," again, the murdered soldier. She said, "In fact, I voted for President Trump today." So she came out and criticized these, October surprise pieces going around. Now, look, among the left-leaning news outlets, the way this is being framed, the main focus from that piece is not so much on the soldier, but more on statements Trump made to former White House Chief of Staff John Kelly. And the comments had first been reported in the book, The Divider, Trump in the White House. And so you have a book come out, The Atlantic come out,
Yeah,
New York Times also did a piece.
he's
There's a
more
few
like
other
a
things.
uniter.
Now, the New York Times published a story alongside this, also on these quotes from John Kelly. They quoted him on many of the exact same claims, and that piece is also now making rounds at the same time. Now, CNN, they played a clip of Kelly making the statements he gave to New York Times. Watch this.
He commented more than once that, that Hitler did some good things too. And of course, if you know history, again, I think he's lacking in that.
Now, look, given the seriousness of this, many critics were questioning, why did Kelly not make this accusation sooner? Why did he wait more than 5 years until a couple weeks just before the 2024 elections to make these claims public? And, on that note, others pointed out some figures involved in the new article were also involved in the claims that Trump had called service members losers and suckers. In fact, it involves the exact same figures. The exact same author at The Atlantic wrote that piece, and the only source that didn't back down from the claims or didn't discredit it was John Kelly, suggesting again that based on the credibility of that one, that the credibility reflects on the current stories. Now, the losers and suckers story, that goes back to 2020. That was from the same author at The Atlantic. It claimed that Trump canceled a visit to an American cemetery near Paris in 2018 because he believed American troops who died in the battle of this, World War I battle were, quote, suckers, and that he didn't want to go to a cemetery of losers. That's what The Atlantic claimed. Now, given that, there's other reports coming out. Trump said the claims were false, and the reason he canceled was not because he disparaged the troops at all, but because there was a bad weather warning and the bad weather prevented him from going. Now, CBS News later obtained an email that confirmed there was a bad weather call for Trump's flight that day from the U.S. Marine Corps. And so it actually turned out that, yes, Trump was given a warning from the U.S. Marine Corps. The email was actually obtained by CBS News, and Trump's reasoning for not going was not what was reported, it seems, but instead at least partly this, right? And the claims were later labeled as false by almost every single official who was present. Everyone who was with Trump that day, everybody who was around him that day, they all made public statements saying Trump never said that, except Kelly. Now, the Trump campaign actually lists these quotes on a fact check. Here's just a couple of what people said. Zach Fuentes, former deputy to Chief of Staff General John Kelly, said, quote, I did not hear POTUS, President of the United States, call anyone losers when I told him about the weather. Honestly, do you think General Kelly would have stood by and let anyone call fallen Marines losers? John Bolton, former National Security Advisor, said this, quote, I did not hear either of those comments or anything even resembling them. I was there at the point in time that morning when it was decided that he would not go to Ayn Marn Cemetery. He decided not to do it because of John Kelly's recommendation. It was entirely a weather-related decision, and I thought the proper thing to do. Now, one of the few people who said otherwise, in fact, I believe the only one, publicly reported at least, was John Kelly. And Trump addressed this and those claims during a 2020 press conference. Watch this.
Nobody that feels more strongly about our soldiers, our wounded warriors, our soldiers that died in war than I do. It's a hoax. Just like the fake dossier was a hoax, just like the Russia was a hoax, it was a total hoax, no collusion, just like so many other things, it's a hoax. And you'll hear more of these things, totally unrelated, as we get closer and closer to election. Sometimes the sources are just people that are disgruntled former so-called employees. I know John Kelly. He was with me, didn't do a good job, had no temperament, and ultimately he was petered out. He was exhausted.
Now, keep in mind the significance of that. The last time this took place was in 2020. That was also right before the presidential elections. And the quotes, again, accusing Trump of disparaging U.S. troops was also something that happened right before the election. And back to the current one, the current October surprise we're now seeing. The same figures, the same authors, the same news outlet making very similar claims, in addition to new claims claiming that Trump, has some fascination with dictators and so on, right? Now, look, alongside the New York Times piece that just came out and the Atlantic piece that just came out, interesting at the same time, Vice President Kamala Harris actually held a press event at the Naval Observatory in Washington, D.C., where she criticized Donald Trump over these claims. Watch.
So yesterday we learned that Donald Trump's former chief of staff, John Kelly, a retired four-star general, confirmed that while Donald Trump was president, he said he wanted generals like Adolf Hitler had. Donald Trump said that because he does not want a military that is loyal to the United States Constitution. He wants a military that is loyal to him.
Now, look, that press conference was criticized by some as a possible violation of the Hatch Act, since, Harris used the official presidential seal and official position as vice president for what appeared to be a campaign event. Although, look, keep in mind, we often see accusations like this and nothing usually happens with it. Notably as well, Congress, they had a whole probe back in 2019 where they accused around 13 Trump officials of also violating the Hatch Act. But, the Hatch Act issue is important because what happens when you make an official presidential announcement using the official seal, using the powers of the president or vice president? Well, this is what happens. If Harris had said those quotes during, let's say, a rally or a campaign event, do you think it would have gotten the same attention as her making an official announcement from her position as vice president? Of course, if you make an official announcement as president or vice president, you get all the cameras, you get the news there, and it's different from a campaign event. And so when an event like that has the effect of basically working as a campaign event, it uses that platform as the vehicle for it. Now, that said, this is not the first time we've seen things like that. Trump has been accused of that as well when he was president. Biden notably has given events where he's talked about the MAGA extremists, although it was far enough away from the campaign to have been considered a violation of the Hatch Act. But this is something we are seeing. But aside from that, these recent events are looking like the October surprise. There's another one coming out now where basically they're saying that there's videos of Trump sexually harassing somebody and groping someone. They're saying there's a video. You just have to believe it's there until we see it. Again, we'll see what happens. The basic issue is this, though. They've already accused Trump of this. How many times has Trump been accused of sexual, issues? How many times is he being accused of being like Hitler or whatever else? It's the same narrative. Now, look, the comparisons with Trump and Hitler and fascism, these have been the general political narrative against him since 2016. We've been hearing this since the 2016 election. Some of the anonymous claims are being called into question by people who are actually present. It's not clear whether it actually happened or not. They're probably not going to ever back down off the claims, but this is where the political debate is right now. Now, it seems the main source, if you were to really step back from all the noise, at least on the Trump talking about Hitler claims, there's a lot of anonymous sources. John Kelly is the main source. And so in a normal news environment, the headline would have been, John Kelly says such and such. And so, again, you can decide which side you believe, depending on which side you think is more credible. Now, look, in other news, the Pentagon is now confirming that North Korea has sent troops to Russia. They've actually done it now. I'll be talking more about this after I come back from a quick break, so stay tuned. And Hurricane Milton down in Florida, the issue of survivability has now become all the more important. We talked to EJ about what to do to prepare for another emergency.
It all starts with what we call PACE. Have a primary, an alternate, contingency, and an emergency. And you plan those four things in PACE for everything, whether it's the plan, whether it's items, since you got backups to the backup to the backup. And in the wilderness, as well as in this event, you want shelter and security, water, fire, and food. Those are four critical things that these folks need. The other thing people forget about is your vital paperwork. So you want to have that in a big Ziploc bag, like a freeze dryer bag. You want to have your marriage licenses, your birth certificates. You want to put your wallet in there, a self-inflatable raft, and a life jacket for every member of the household.